I just looked down at my notes. I was just looking at my notes, and I realized that I'm out of colored ink on my printer. And so anything that I was printing out that had color in it is coming up blank. So I'll need a quick break here to go back and fill in the blanks. And speaking of filling in the blanks, I'm filling in for Art again. I thought Art would be back, but comforting the afflicted, afflicting the comfortable, bringing faith to the doubtful, doubt to the faithful, friend to the friendless, odor to the odorless, calling lame radio to rise and talk. This is Ian punted in for Art Bell for one more week, and then that's it. I'm going back to the early show. I'm going back to Coast Live before they won't let me back in again. Ross has done a fabulous job filling in on the show, and so maybe what we'll do is we'll just swap, and maybe in the weeks ahead, we'll get Ross to come over and do this show, and I think that'd be fun for everybody too. But if you missed it, fun show. Ross on Coast to Coast Live. You can always check that out if you have Stream Link. It is like a night of legends. If there's a theme for the two guests tonight, it's that they are both legendary. Bill McDonald is a legend in and of himself, both as a guy who's combined his interest in UFOs, investigations into the paranormal, and art. And by this case, I mean the discipline of art, not just Art Bell, but with his interest with the people who have come before him, the famous ufologists. We will pay homage to them coming up. Some of the UFO legends on Memorial Day. What they did, what did they achieve, what were some of their breakthroughs? We'll talk about that with Bill, and also somebody who achieved some pretty cool stuff on his own. And we have the art of Ray Harryhausen with us. It's a new coffee table book. But when it comes to motion picture special effects, anybody that knows anything about special effects knows the name Harryhausen. Some people think that's his first and last name. It is actually Ray Harryhausen, and he is movie magic. It is a distinct honor to have a few minutes to talk with him. Any other movie fans out there I know will enjoy this conversation, and they are welcome to join us later on this hour. We'll take a couple of calls when we have him on. In crypto news, mysterious clouds, the X-Men movie, and Pat Robertson, mutant, coming up next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art, this is Ian. Well, I think I figured it all out. I'm missing a few key words here and there in my script because the color didn't come through. So I think I got this worked out. We'll get to some crypto news in just a second. A reminder, because a couple of people have emailed in and they wanted to know about that special deal for After Dark. Go to the coasttocoastam.com website for the details on the After Dark newsletter and the special deal that we're offering right now. And while you're there, too, just remember what George is doing and how many kids he's trying to help sign up and help save a life. You can do it through coasttocoastam.com. A powerful earthquake has struck in Indonesia. You probably have heard this off and on throughout the day. Homes, hotels flattened, killing people as they slept. At least 3,500 now and growing. Also thousands injured, more in the nation's worst disaster since 2004, with the tsunami hitting. Neither the earth nor the sea must feel safe for these poor people. They already have had a lot of aid. They just might need some more. Now all they need, of course, is like a major typhoon from the air, for the perfect trifecta. And sadly, all the predictions are that this year they will get it. Speaking of the skies, from the Coast to Coast AM website, cool story, glowing silvery blue clouds that have been spreading around the world and brightening mysteriously in recent years will soon be studied in unprecedented detail by NASA. They're called noctilucent clouds, which glow at night, and they form in the upper atmosphere. If you want to see an image of them, you can find them at the website. An altitude of about 80 kilometers. This summer, their glow can be seen just after sunset or just before sunrise. That is to say, if only I could see through the clouds of giant Minnesota mosquitoes, which kind of block my view. The skeetosphere, as I like to call it. It sits over my house. Last week's guest, Judge Andrew Napolitano from Fox News, had a lot to say about the relationship between the Bush administration and the Justice Department. Tonight, it has been revealed that top officials at the Department of Justice and the FBI threatened to resign this week if President Bush ordered them to return materials seized in last week's raid of Representative William Jefferson's office. The showdown is said to be reaching a tipping point, that according to one senior administration official, but all of that has been put on hold, at least temporarily, by President Bush's decision to seal the material for 45 days. More on the judge's opinions from last week in the email. Lots of reaction about Judge Napolitano. Sun-Times says owners of Chicago's estimated 600,000 dogs would be required to microchip their pets. The latest RFID development. They would also limit tethering, which I could go for, and paying stiff fines for letting dogs roam free. And people must choose between neutering and higher license fees. This under a sweeping crackdown proposed by an influential alderman. Don't think I'm kidding on this. If this RFID thing works on dogs, kids could be next. I don't know about probably not the neutering part, but I mean, there's a lot of people looking at making it mandatory to start microchipping kids. And just, for all of the Amber Alerts and all the other things out there. Just something to think about. 12-year-old mutant, X-Men fanatic in my house, didn't love the movie. But I thought it was fun. Still, X-Men 3, or X3, The Last Stand, took in about $45 million on Friday, which is the second highest opener of all time, right behind Star Wars Attack of the Sith. Insiders are predicting that this third episode in the X-Men trilogy could do as much as, are you ready for this, $150 million by Tuesday. Word of mouth is strong. They're tracking X-Men 3, No Real Rivals, opening up this weekend. The best part for me was the war at the end. It was cool, the mutant war at the end. And also Stan Lee watering his lawn at the beginning. I mean, he is a legend. Like Ray Harryhausen, coming up later on this hour. It'd be cool to get Stan Lee on for a whole show, wouldn't it? I'll have to try and do that. And by the way, Da Vinci Code is falling just like I predicted last week. Once people who read the book went to go see it for the scenery, it really won't have much of an audience. As to my comparison last week that the Da Vinci Code is to Christian history what James Bond is to the history of the Cold War, and that just because there was a Cold War doesn't mean there actually was a Goldfinger or an Oddjob. Begetting asked, does this mean there wasn't an Octopussy? There is one if you believe, Begetting. And sadly, more email just like that on the way. Speaking of X-Men, Pat Robertson says he has leg pressed 2,000 pounds. That's right, 1 ton with his legs. The 700 Club says his feat of strength was done, and it is chronicled on the website how Pat Robertson leg pressed 2,000 pounds. According to the website, Robertson worked his way up to lifting a ton with the help of a doctor who is not named. Dr. Charles Xavier, maybe? Anyway, the web posting said 2 men loaded the leg press machine with 2,000 pounds and let it down on Mr. Robertson, who pushed it up 1 rep and let it go back down again. Clay Travis of CBSSportsline.com called the 2,000-pound claim impossible, saying that is 665 pounds more than college football linemen. And where in the world did Pat Robertson even find a machine that could hold 2,000 pounds at one time? Travis asked. Pat Robertson says he made one with paper clips and pipe cleaners. No, he did say that. Russia on Friday put into orbit a satellite carried by a converted ballistic missile. They converted a ballistic missile and launched it from a submerged nuclear submarine. That's how they got the satellite into space. Isn't that cool? The satellite will study atmospheric, volcanic, and seismic phenomena. And by the way, who needs to convert ballistic missile launchers in submarines when you've got Pat Robertson leg lifting 2,000 pounds? He can just punt the satellites into space. As for last week's email and the question about toys firing off by themselves, Shannon wrote, "This happens in my house all the time. When we are downstairs, I will hear my daughter's pound puppy go off upstairs. When we are sitting in the living room, her toys in the dining room will start to play music." Elizabeth wrote, "It's the creepiest. It happens with my son's space toys, just like in Close Encounters, even when I take the batteries out." Tony from Reedsport, Oregon, said he enjoyed last week's show with Charles Osmond. He said a real treat. If that wasn't enough, he said it was a great joy to actually hear we have a man like Judge Andrew Napolitano out there. That was a good feeling. Why is it that we never see good men like that on the ballot to run for Congress or other office? Thanks for keeping me up late, your friend Tony. Thank you, Tony. Ian, putting Judge Napolitano on is a progressive move. Good for you. I so enjoyed hearing the interview, but more than this, I was delighted knowing that so many other people would be hearing him. Yes, yours truly, Deb, South Lyon, Michigan. But not everybody felt great about that. I listened closely to your interview with Judge Andrew Napolitano last night. As a conservative and an inveterate watcher of Fox News, I especially enjoyed the judge on his frequent appearances on The O'Reilly Factor, Fox and Friends, and for his incisive and perceptive comments. But his position on General Michael Hayden, specifically as head of the CIA in the Bush administration's generally vis-a-vis the domestic surveillance program, is simply wrong. General Hayden followed the advice of lawyers at the NSA, the Justice Department, and the White House legal team. In every case, the program as he designed it was deemed to be legal. The judge would have us believe the general was some renegade operating on his own and had taped the conversations of Joe Sixpack just for the fun of it. That's Dennis from Gulf Breeze, Florida. You know, I pressed the judge a lot last week on whether he bought the just following orders argument, and he said he didn't. General Hayden sensed it was wrong, said the judge, but became a yes man, the judge said, and he had to take responsibility for that, even if the White House pressured him. For that line of questioning, I was to be shamed by John. He took my pressuring of the judge to mean that I was some right-wing shill trying to get General Hayden off the hook. He wrote, "Although you purport to be well-informed and convicted by the teachings of Christ, the argument raised by your questioning of Judge Napolitano is totally depraved and moronic. America seems on the brink of creating the Fourth Reich. If 20 million radio listeners are persistently poisoned by commentators who hold that illegal wiretapping is okay," somehow he got that from my questions, "it's just following orders. Shame on you, Mr. Punnett," he screamed. "You had the audacity to repeatedly raise a specter of innocence for reasonable use of such defense." And then he wrote, "Peace and love, John, Newark, New Jersey." So John from Newark is shaming me for being a neocon. He actually says here, W could use neocon blood, new neocon blood in his administration. You no doubt offer views he's after. Meanwhile, in the very next email, I got shamed again, this time from a conservative who was convinced that I was some Democratic operative. He wrote, "Shame on you. Yes, Ian, shame. You and Judge Napolitano both know there is no evidence that the NSA wiretapped the American people en masse, but you say it and repeat it over and over again. You're just aiding the Democrats' Bush bashing." There you go. Same interview, same line of questions. One is absolutely certain I'm Bush bashing. The other is that I'm a Bush lapdog. And you know what? I think that means I'm doing something right. Because politically, I'm neither in the Democratic or Republican Party. Remember, I'm an active member of the Donner Party. We get together every 4 years for a convention, and whoever isn't eaten becomes the presidential nominee. Unfortunately, there isn't anybody left to vote, but, that's why we never really get anywhere. Not everybody has a sense of humor about politics. Patricia wrote, I work the graveyard shift and look forward to Coast and Coast each night until now. I was appalled to hear the recently completed interview with Judge Andrew Napolitano. Why was this man allowed to climb upon his liberal, decidedly un-American soapbox and rant about his obvious dislike for our sitting president? Never have I heard such on Coast to Coast. I was hoping that one show would not fall victim to rabid Democratic rhetoric, continually reminding America what sore losers they are. She will never be listening to me again when I'm guest hosting. She swore that, so I know she's not listening now. Right, Patricia? Meanwhile, Ruth says, Judge Napolitano for president. Ruth is 77. She dug it. Glad to have you, Ruth. Patricia, if you're really not listening, get over yourself on this. These are just questions. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the judge. We'll have him back on again in a couple of weeks on Coast to Coast Live on the earlier show, and we'll have him on for the whole 3 hours. Saying hi to Shirley in Tucson, Alma in Mossy, West Virginia, and Karen Dawn. My name is Eric, says a farmer from the Midwest and a longtime listener. I've been observing a changing trend in the weather patterns across the country. A recurring series of huge counterclockwise rotating low-pressure systems that have been moving from east to west across North America. This spring, summer, the first seasons, I've noticed this phenomenon. Keep up the great work. Eric, thank you. Ian, it was so nice to hear you on Coast to Coast recently. Unfortunately, here in San Francisco, the station that carries Coast to Coast does not carry the pre-show on the weekends that you host. I say way too bad because you're very funny and it's always a good time to listen to you when you're hosting. Have a great summer. Hopefully we get to hear you sometimes on the regular Coast to Coast. Cheers, Lena in San Francisco. In fact, the early show just got picked up by a couple of big stations this week, including one of the biggest, coolest stations in Canada, thanks to all the listener support. And might I add, it was a lot of some very nice emails and phone calls to the program directors of these stations to remind them that they want to hear Coast to Coast Live. Saturday night, it's live, it's fun, it's a good time. So maybe you should do that with Jack Swanson, who's the program director in San Francisco, okay? And just email him, be very polite, but just email and to tell him I said this. So everybody in San Francisco, if you want Coast to Coast Live, email Jack Swanson and tell him that he's a good-looking man and he smells good, too. Tell him he's a good-looking, good-smelling man. That's all. And just say, and you hope a good-looking, good-smelling man like him would put on Coast to Coast Live. I hope Jack finds that funny, because I do. The Speed Bump Ultimatum. It's an ongoing novel series about us here on Coast to Coast. The SpeedBumpUltimatum.com now has us as action heroes, Art George and myself. Dear Ian, I believe that spontaneous human combustion occurs when an angel with a flaming sword slays someone. In one fatal incident, a woman spontaneously combusted on a dance floor, but when witnesses approached her, the flames quickly died out. This makes sense. If an angel were charged with eliminating a certain individual, I'm sure that the angel would be careful not to harm other people who might be present. Daniel, Omaha, Nebraska. I can't argue with that. And I think it's a good sign, since spontaneous combustion happens so rarely, that angels don't smite us that often. But how bad a dancer must this woman have been? From angels to the voice of God, a lot of people writing about Ross. Thought he did great. One man wrote to say that Ross Mitchell's voice makes Darth Vader sound, well, not like Darth Vader, which makes me sound like an Ewok. Ian, I'm a Streamlink member, and I listen to your show in the morning. As I was listening to Saturday's show you did for Art Bell, I consistently spit out my kashi and soy milk in laughter. Clean, Al. Thanks, Al's colon. Just a thought, could it be that your body was just rejecting the kashi and soy milk? It's Maija who wrote, you shouldn't fret about your voice. As with other things in life, it's not the size that matters, but how you use it. God, Maija, I hope you're a woman. He sounds like Tony Tiger, sure, but Ian, nobody can do Tony the Tiger. Sorry, nobody can do the mayor of Munchkinland better than you, Joe. Yes, but that usually hasn't been considered a very positive thing. And I'm sorry, writes one emailer, you're just not weird enough. Coast to Coast listeners, as a rule, need to feel like whoever is hosting the show is as much of a kook as they are. That's just not you. Would it help to know that I'm wearing Depends undergarments right now, and I don't even have a bladder control problem? Oh, wait, yes, I do. Oh, never mind. All right, and then coming up, just some final thoughts about music, because a lot of people ask about the music. And so I'll save two thoughts about music. It just seemed like last week was particularly good, according to one person, and particularly awful, according to another. We'll give credit to where credit is due. And Ray Harryhausen coming up. When it comes to motion picture special effects, there is only one name that everybody in the business reveres. Ray Harryhausen for a few minutes of fun coming up next. On Coast to Coast AM, in for art. This is Ian. Well, we got Ray Harryhausen coming up. And I was thinking maybe we should, run the numbers here. But you know what? Moments pass. So let's just say that if you get through, that's great. And we might just get a couple of calls for Ray Harryhausen coming up here in just a few minutes when we get him on. Or I just might be totally selfish and keep him completely to myself. Gotta love that Rare Earth tune. I'm particularly proud of the music that we use as bumpers on the show. We put a lot of thought into it. We bicker about it off the air, and we're always kind of going, let's try a little of that. And so it is that I read you this email from Pamela, saved it for after the rejoin. She says, "Hi, whoever picked out the music for last week's Coast to Coast did real good," Pamela says. "I was in the music industry for many years on the production and executive production end, and my ear is pretty jaded, but I really enjoyed last night's music bumpers. Thanks, Pamela." So I want to give credit to where credit is due on that. There are two people that kind of split this shift in that chair. Nikki does the first half of the show, and then Kiris does the second half. So can I just say, Nikki, excellent job. Kiris, you get no credit whatsoever. Why? Because Kiris played Olivia Newton-John singing Xanadu a couple weeks ago. And for that, I'm freezing him out. No credit for you, Kiris. The memory's still too strong in my mind. But Frank hates the music. Too long and penetrating for this time slot, writes Frank. For those of us, he says, that leave the radio on all night while trying to sleep. Thanks, Frank. I hadn't really thought about programming the radio show to the sleeping. It's really not what we do. But I tell you what, tell us what you want. Just tell us, I think, when you're going to go to bed. Tell us when you feel like Mr. Sandman is dancing on the bridge of your nose, Frank. And we'll do the rest of the show whispering so we don't disturb you. So just call us, and we'll just talk like this for the rest of the show so we don't wake up people while they're listening to the radio in the background, okay? But if you get up to use the bathroom, Frank, call us so we can use our indoor voices, if that's all right. Just, while you're awake. All right, coming up, Ray Harryhausen. We may get your calls in on him, too. Very, very cool man with a great coffee table book out. If you don't know him, you should. But we have to recognize this guy on Memorial Day. Not because he's done anything for, honoring the servicemen and women, and they deserve the credit for Memorial Day, but for all of the joy that he's brought to moviegoers everywhere. And Memorial Day weekend is the traditional time when the big new summer releases come out. The big special effects films are traditionally released on Memorial Day weekend. And they all owe a debt to Ray Harryhausen, and so do I, for all those years of enjoyment. We'll talk about it with him next on Coast to Coast AM. In for art, this is Ian. Well, there are a couple of people hanging on, and we may get to a couple of calls coming up before the end of this half hour. Bill McDonald next hour, honoring the legends of ufology. But Ray Harryhausen is here, and I have worked for months to try to make this happen, so I'm so glad you gave us the time. Good evening, Mr. Harryhausen.
Good evening. It's morning here in Spain.
In Spain?
Yes.
Is that where we're talking to you?
It's morning in Spain. It's about 7:30, quarter to 8.
Well, thank you so much for giving us the time.
I can hardly hear you. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. I hope you can hear me a little better. I'll speak right into the microphone.
Right.
Okay. You are somebody that I have been admiring for a long time. I know you have a lot of fans around the world, but not everybody knows your name like they should. I hope this coffee table book will be a way for some people to be introduced to your terrific work over the years.
Yes, my second book has just been released in America. We came back from the United States about a month ago.
And for people who don't know your story, I guess it all starts with King Kong when you're a kid?
Yeah, I was affected by King Kong, yes, and that shows how powerful a movie can be. It changed my life.
And did you really think at 13, I'm going to get into making special effects in movies?
Well, it didn't quite happen that way. It took years.
Well, I mean, tell us the story.
It develops over a long period of time.
Well, because you get into it pretty early, because by the late 40s, early 1950s, aren't you already working in film?
Yes, I did in the late 40s. I worked with Willis O'Brien, who made King Kong. I had that great pleasure. And Marion Cooper on Mighty Joe Young, the original.
Although you did a lot of the work on Mighty Joe Young.
I did most of the animation, yes, but it was Willis O'Brien's picture, actually.
But then you start making your own. So, I mean, for people that can picture this, let's go through some of the titles that you are best known for.
I'm sorry, I don't. You sound so far away. It's hard for me to.
Well, I am so far away, of course. But yes, in Jason and the Argonauts.
Yes.
Sinbad.
That came much later. Yes, that was in our color period.
Right. So
I was trying to get away from destroying cities. I got trapped in the low-budget pictures with The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, then It Came from Beneath the Sea, and they're going to be colorized in the future. And then Jason, then came Sinbad, the seventh voyage of Sinbad, and then Jason and the Argonauts.
And some of these, I mean, I love stop-action animation. I enjoy, like, I don't know whether you have had a chance to see any of the works like Chicken Run or The Curse of the Were-Rabbit that's done Wallace and Gromit. But I love that.
It uses the same process of stop motion where you actually animate a figure, but those are very stylized obvious puppet films.
Right, and you were going for a level of realism, and unlike the Wallace and Gromit movies, you did everything pretty much yourself?
Yes, I did. I worked alone. A lot of people think I had a crew, but I never did.
And so, like the famous scene where the skeleton battle, the skeleton sword battle, you did that all yourself?
Yes, all by myself, yes. It took 4 months for a 5-minute sequence.
And so how much could you get done in a single day?
It depends. It varies depending on the type of scene. It consists of a series of short cuts. And you have to make a new setup when you change camera angle. And sometimes I would only get 13 frames a day. And other times I could get maybe 20 feet. It depends on the particular situation.
Now, people that know these movies, they immediately recognize the work that you did. Of the people who've been inspired by you, whose work do you admire the most, and what are you enjoying? Like when a big special effects movie comes out, like X-Men 3, do you go to see them just to see what Hollywood is up to?
Well, occasionally I do, but the whole situation has changed now. Most things are done by computer animation. Right.
Do you enjoy that?
Where you have to. Well, yes, on some products, but it's not the be-all and buy-all. I like to think that there's room for every technique. After all, Kermit the Frog brought back the hand puppet, which goes back to ancient Greece, and the string puppet was brought back by Thunderbird. So there's room, depending on the type of story you're telling, for every technique.
And you liked working with mythology and the monsters of mythology more than the typical horror movie monsters.
Yes, well, we don't call them monsters, we call them creatures. Because I remember when I was growing up, we used to see Maria Montez and John Hall in the Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, and then some of the Steve Reeves pictures, Hercules Unchained, and they would talk about these creatures, but you never saw them on the screen.
And you brought them to the screen in ways which, at the time, this was breakthrough material, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a breakthrough because we were limited. Today with the computer, you can do almost anything. You can blot out wires, you can do all sorts of things which you can go over and over without it looking doopy. But we had a lot of restrictions which took a great deal of time to solve the problems.
When you're doing one of those famous scenes, like in the Sinbad movies or Jason and the Argonauts, where like when you have the skeleton sword battle, did it ever get lonely just being the one guy posing all of these things for one frame at a time?
Yes. Well, see, a lot of my process is done with miniature projection. We photograph the actors first, and then on a small screen behind the animated creatures, we combine the two together through a system of mats.
I would think, just being you, it's really
quite a complicated process.
Let's go to Steve east of the Rockies, see if Ray Harryhausen can hear him all the way in Spain. Steve,
hi,
you have a question?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Steve, go ahead.
Okay, first, one of my own personal special effects after the movie King Kong, I had a craving for bananas. And guys, what do you think about the special effects of about 40 million illegal invaders inside America?
Okay, that's just dumb, Steve. Why are you wasting your time with that? Come on. Okay, so let us go back to where your work is really respected, which is in Hollywood, where you got the Honorary Academy Award. What was that?
I did. That was in '92.
That is so. I remember that night, and I was so proud for you that night that Hollywood took the time to do that. Had you been nominated before that?
No, never. Never nominated even. For some reason, our pictures didn't. They were made on a very tight budget, most of them.
Were there special effects awards back then?
Yes, but they never nominated anything of our films. Columbia put them up for nomination, but they were never. Of course, I lived in England, and I still do.
And since you worked alone on all of these things, and maybe that was part of it, you didn't have all of the connections that people have now, because the special effects part of Hollywood has gotten to be such a major part of the business.
Yes, well, they dominate today, but we tried to tell a story. We were very careful. It sometimes took us 3 or 4 months to develop the story, sometimes 6 months. And Charles Snare and myself and the writer would develop these. These are not the type of pictures that where the director has control. Like in Europe, the word director means the auteur. But Charles Snare and the writer, just due to the fact that they had to be made on very tight budgets, we had to develop a story that we could shoot in an economical way.
Of the other movie other movie creatures, or the other special effects movies out there, where do you see your work continuing? Where have you felt honored? Where you've seen somebody's doing something, that they were inspired by you?
Well, I'm delighted that our pictures are inspiring. When I go to these various conventions, a family of 3 would say, "My father saw your films way back in the 50s, and he taught me to see them, and I'm teaching my child. I'm glad that our films have inspired people.
Well, I love the fact that the restaurant in Monsters, Inc. was named after you.
Yeah, I was thinking of opening a sushi bar to cash in on that.
I think you should. But that can't be. Have you talked to some of the other special effects people? Have you had a chance to have relationships with them?
I'm not quite certain of the question.
Of the other special effects people in Hollywood, do you have a chance to talk with them? Have you had a chance to teach
we
any of them?
just came back from a book signing tour, and we went to DreamWorks and to Disney's and ILM and Virginia and St. Louis, and I had a chance. Most of the special effect houses, we were trying to sell my book, and it's called The Art of Ray Harryhausen. It's just been released. My previous book was An Animated Life.
So you can find this coffee table book. You can link up to it through coasttocoastam.com. Edie is on the first-time caller line for Ray Harryhausen. Go ahead, Edie.
Hi, Ray.
Hi.
Oh, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for all of your work.
Well, thank you.
Through the years, I can't tell you how much I have loved all of your films. And I am still like a little girl pushing 50, and I still love every time one comes on cable, I'm still there with the popcorn. Jason and the Argonauts is my favorite.
Well, we tried to make films that would please the whole family.
Ray, you know, I must have seen...
very restricted because of censorship in the early days.
Yes. I must have seen Jason and the Argonauts about 20 times, and all the other ones a lot. And I can't tell you the heartfelt gratitude that a privilege it is to speak with you. And I want to ask you one more question. What did you think of the work of William Castle and Ed Wood in that time period? And I'll get off the phone, Ray. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's a great question.
Bye.
Did you know Ed Wood?
No, I didn't, no.
You know who we're talking about, considered one of the worst special effects guys of all time.
No, I'm afraid I never met him.
But what about William Castle? Because you did a lot of the Hammer films, right?
Yes, that 1 million BC.
And so...
That was a Hammer film.
Right.
I felt I didn't like remakes. So one time they wanted to remake Kong, and I felt that you couldn't top it anymore. So, but I felt the 1 million BC, the first one made in the 40s, could be much more improved with the special effects by using the animation technique.
Well, I want to give you a chance to talk with some other fans who want to honor you and this book, The Art of Ray Harryhausen, which is out. Carol, west of the Rockies, I believe, on Coast to Coast AM for Ray Harryhausen. Go ahead, Carol.
Mr. Harryhausen, first of all, I'll spare all of you my Maria Uspenskaya impression, which I did once before, Ian, when you had Linda Godfrey on.
Okay.
And you liked it. But my main thing is, Mr. Harryhausen, when you grew up, what was your first inkling that this was going to be your bent in life? And because of the loneliness that you were talking about earlier in terms of setting up these things on your own without a crew, did you have siblings?
I'm not quite certain with the question.
I think it's
difficult to hear. You sound miles away for some reason.
Let me ask, Carol, just so it's easier for me. Sure. Did you have brothers and sisters growing up? Were you used to just playing alone?
No, I'm an only child.
Aha.
So that makes sense then, doesn't it? That you could sit there and play with the figurines.
So to speak, in the early days.
Thank you, Carol. Let me get Jim east of the Rockies on Coast to Coast AM for our last caller for Ray Harryhausen. Go ahead, Jim.
Good evening, Ian and Ray Harryhausen. Thanks a lot for making terrific movies. Did you do Clash of the Titans?
Yes, Clash of the Titans was my last film.
Now, that one inspired me to study astronomy and the zodiac, and I've gone far with that. It's
wonderful. Greek mythology is so not taught very much in the schools anymore.
Well, that's a shame.
But I understand Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans are now part of the school curriculum sometimes.
Well, I absolutely love that I can look into the sky and I'm reminded of your film all the time.
Wonderful.
Well, glad we can. Thank you, Jim, for that comment, and glad that we can remind people of the importance of that and Greek mythology and all it, because you brought a lot of. You really did illustrate them in a way which honored the material. It didn't just, you weren't just pimping the material for the characters. You really did try to stay within the context of the original story.
Well, we try to, but the original stories are very disconnected. And to make a motion picture that people, an audience, will sit for an hour and a half to, you have to rearrange things and do a beginning, middle, and an end. And that's not always practical when you try to take a story and simply transfer it onto the screen. Well, so we had to rob, pardon me, Jason and the Argonauts. We had to use some parts of the Hercules legend where he fought a Hydra because people had seen the dragons on the screen before.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
We felt it would add to the film.
Thank you for your time.
So we used the Hercules concept of the...
Morning, Frank. There you go. Groucho Marx's old golfing buddy, Alice Cooper, who now runs a restaurant in Phoenix. Did I understand that right? I thought it was very cool to talk with Ray Harryhausen last hour, and even if, because of the connection, I had to keep the questions simple, I thought that was way cool. But it's part of the theme of this evening, if there is one, and that's honoring the legends. It's Memorial Day, so it's important for us to always remember those who have fallen, those who have come before us. And I encourage you to take a few minutes to make Memorial Day memorable and to do something, one thing, at least one thing, to show that it mattered, that their sacrifice counted. And whether that's just tipping your hat as you go past a veterans cemetery, or maybe even better yet, just going in and putting flowers down somewhere, even for some vet who you don't even know, or whether it's, doing something for your kids or for kids in the neighborhood so that they can better understand this isn't just about barbecues and baseball, and or big movies opening up. It has to mean something, or it's meaningless, and there's no point in having it then. And I really think that we just have to be intentional about honoring Memorial Day, and I hope you'll do something. Even if you don't have a veteran in your family, I hope you can appreciate those who do, and just how tough it is to think about the lives that have been lost over this holiday weekend. So remember that, and then also remember that there are lots of cool legends out there. And Bill McDonald has been studying them. He has made a point to become an educator on the subject of the legends of ufology. And we'll talk about that with him coming up next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art, this is Ian. Bill McDonald has an interesting background. I want to kind of vet it with you if I can, Bill, just to make sure that I understand it, okay?
Certainly. Glad to be on with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. So you have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice.
Correct.
Which led you to work as a private investigator before you worked with the United States Marine Corps, or at the same time?
At the same time, and that will clue some folks into certain things right there.
Okay, but I just want to understand. So, private investigator, you did that for about a dozen years, and you worked with a lot of police departments and federal agencies?
I worked with individuals and with teams that were associated with several different police departments and with certain task forces and certain projects.
When would a task force, or what would a certain project be that would need to bring you, Bill McDonald, in as a private investigator?
Some of them were personnel-related issues where they needed a fresh face that wouldn't be recognized, and my specialty was undercover.
So they were doing like an undercover thing, and they needed you to be an actor in some undercover drama. That could.
I had been trained by my boss, Victor Ruben Mendoza, who was at that time the owner of Phalanx Investigations, in the fine art of becoming somebody's best friend in order to observe and report from a position on the inside.
So you're used to kind of quickly ingratiating yourself with the mark, with the potential perp, or whatever it is that you're doing.
I have a talent for getting on people's good side or getting on people's bad side, depending on what I need to accomplish.
Okay. And so how will we know that you're actually on our good side tonight and you're not just faking it?
Well, you have to go to my references.
Okay.
Whitley Strieber was the first person to bring me on Coast to Coast many years ago, and I went on with him a half dozen times before getting handed off to Mike Siegel, and then Art Bell, and then George Norrie.
I'm just kidding you,
Okay. Well,
I totally trust you.
I just wanted to say that, Hal Putoff will vouch for me. Dr. Bob Wood will vouch for me. These people know me personally, and they know that I'm an extremely honorable guy.
No, I know that. I'm just kidding. All right. So, but then while you were working with these federal agencies and with police departments, then you're also working with the Marine Corps. Now, what were you teaching when you would be working with the Marine Corps?
Well, when I was in the Marine Corps, that was very interesting. I was in the Air Wing, and I was stationed at MCAS El Toro in Santa Ana, California, which basically isn't there anymore. And at El Toro, I actually taught 277 Marines in a squadron how to do CPR, among other things. And I had two MOSs. The first was 6357, which was the radar and flight control systems for the FA-18A and B. The C's and D's hadn't come out yet at that time. And I also had a secondary MOS in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare defense. I went to the 3rd Marine Air Wing Special School for that and took a lot of pride in, excelling in the class.
So where does the UFO thing come into it?
Well, when you are in the military and when you are running around with a bunch of detectives and people who are basically gathering information and evidence and that sort of thing, you have occasion to travel. And occasionally you end up in some rather awkward positions in some rather faraway places, and you see some rather unusual things. And the inspiration comes. And then the other side of the story is that as your career progresses and that sort of thing, you become very malcontent with the nature of the work, with the nature of the people you are working with, and you start looking for a way to quit your job, retire, however you want to put it. And so the Roswell case, of all things, gave me the opportunity to leave the service. It gave me something to do which kept me in the public eye. It made it so that I would not, get called back later or forced to return to, work that I had been doing at the time.
I mean, all right, I got to unpack that a little bit because it seems like you're speaking a kind of code, and I want to make sure I understand what you mean when you say awkward positions in faraway places. What does that mean to you?
I got to travel south of the border. I got to travel overseas. I got to travel into a number of areas, which at the time was fun, but it brings back a lot of very bad memories, and right. I sustained a lot of personal losses. And
well, those are the faraway places. What did you mean when you said in awkward positions?
I didn't like the politics of the change between what was going on with the Bush administration and the Clinton administration. I didn't like the change in people's attitudes. I didn't like the way personal or political correctness started to enter into corporate environments. I didn't like the way it started to enter into government service. I didn't like the way it started to enter into popular culture. My artwork, which was a very effective cover for me as a private investigator, started to create problems for me because it was very salacious. It was, a lot of sexual content. And people started to attack me personally for the work that I was doing, even though the Japanese were buying it from me, and people in Hong Kong and all throughout Southeast Asia and Europe and different places like that. I had a following, and I generated a lot of income and did a lot of stuff that way. But suddenly, earning a living on the side with my artwork was starting to create problems for me. It was starting to get me in trouble with some of the people that I was working with. It was starting to get me reprimands, and I just didn't like it. So I decided, and the final straw that broke the camel's back was when my boss was asked to relocate the company to Kuwait City, Kuwait in 1993.
Which company?
Phalanx.
Okay, just so I understand.
I was asked to basically relocate forever to Kuwait City, Kuwait. This was after the first Gulf War. And become an American expatriate and live, what should have been a fun and dandy life, over there on the Emir's money. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be an American expatriate. I didn't want to leave the beaches of Southern California. I loved traveling, but home was always on the beach in Southern California between Dana Point and Laguna Beach. And I didn't want to go anywhere else forever.
Well, why would they make, I'm still trying to follow this, why would they make the detective agency move to Kuwait City?
Because Victor got a really, really good offer.
Oh,
there was a lot of money in it, and I wasn't interested in the money, and I didn't want to go to Kuwait.
So you left the Marine Corps, at least in part because of your...
Well, I left the Marine Corps in 1988. I then joined the National Guard for 5 years. But I left Phalanx and the National Guard at the same time.
And the problem was because of the artwork that you were doing, which was erotic artwork.
That was some of why I wanted to leave. I was getting tired of the problems that I was catching with my coworkers and my immediate chain of command in regards to the artwork that I was selling and some of the clientele that I was working with. And
I thought you were doing alien artwork. I thought is what you're kind of best known for.
That didn't start until 1993.
Okay, so you weren't doing erotic alien artwork.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
I was highly discouraged.
What happened with the alien artwork was I met some people, believe it or not, a television program audition for a Bill Cosby game show. And they were telling me about the work that they were doing in regards to work with UFO Magazine, which at that time was being run by Vicki Cooper Ecker and Sherry Stark with the assistance of Dawn Ecker. And my situation was I became very interested in illustrating for that magazine, and they became the first magazine to publish my artwork, and especially in the United States. And I was very much interested in some of the UFO phenomena, and I got a chance to meet with UFO researchers very quickly because of some other third-party persons who introduced me to these people because of my artwork. And I just fell into it literally overnight, and it became an instant new vocation. It became a new direction. And once I got involved in that, I was less desirable to some of my former employers, and I liked that very much.
Okay. So if you had to describe yourself now, you would be, if somebody asked you what you do, you would say alien alien artist or, alien illustrator and investigator or educator. How would you describe it?
I take on private investigative assignments, especially for publishers, book authors, attorneys, civil attorneys, whenever I can get the cases because it's very good money.
Okay.
And I am the co-owner of Argonaut Grey Wolf Productions, which is a production company, multimedia, radio, television, and film. And I am a commercial artist who has a specialty of forensic reconstruction illustration. If you give me a skull, Ian, I can reconstruct what the person looked like in 3 or 4 days in my sketch pad. And at alienufoart.com, which is my website, there is a page called the Forensic Faces page, where Lloyd Pye brought me the skull of the Star Child, and 3 days later I gave him the face of the Aztec child that that skull was from. I also gave him the face of the Native American female who died with the child.
And you did that based on the skull, without having...
Based on the two skulls that Lloyd brought over to my house.
Okay.
And I was able to look at the malar bones on the adult female skull, and I was able to determine that she was Native American. And I was able to get the story from Lloyd regarding where the two skulls were found in Chihuahua, Mexico. I was able to determine that the tribe that they were originally from 950 years ago was the Aztecs, which meant they were of the Shoshonean Native American lineage with the Ute Aztecan language tradition, which includes the Shoshone and the California coastal Indians and the Aztecs, and most of the tribes south of the Santa Ana riverbed in California. And I was able to do reconstructions using all of the available data on that particular structure of face, the cranial facial reconstruction tables that were available at the UCI Medical Library. And I was able to reconstruct these two Native Americans. And for anybody who clicks onto the Forensic Faces page using the sitemap at alienUFOart.com, they will see the faces. And they'll also see my opinions that, the Star Child and the mom were both 100% human. Lloyd Pye very much wanted an alien hybrid version, which I attempted as a favor to him as a third drawing. And that came out looking very much like descriptions that the Hopi had described for some of the beings that come from the stars within their culture and their cultural traditions. And so I included that as well. And that was a very wonderful 3-day period of time in 1999 with Lloyd Pye during the first week in April. And while the skulls were in my house, my wife handled them, and she got some psychic impressions because my wife is very, very psychic, and she's a ghostbuster, by the way. She hunts ghosts just like the two plumbers from the East Coast. And she photographs anomalous energy manifestations in locations that are purported to be haunted. And she managed to land herself a 3-day migraine headache just from handling the skulls. And Whitley Strieber experienced the same symptoms of like a migraine headache when he handled the skulls sometime during that same time of year.
But if they're totally human, why would that happen?
There's a metaphysical component to things that, as a detective, I overlooked until I met my wife. She has forced me, kicking and screaming, to take a look at the metaphysical aspects of many things that go on in this world. And, as a seminarian, you are well aware of these metaphysical aspects. You have a lot of respect for them. I've listened to you. And I have been taught respect for many of these things myself.
Well, I'm good with that. The interesting part, though, is actually I'm not sure I understand the metaphysics of the skull. The metaphysical aspect of our lives, I get. But what do you think actually was being generated from the skull that gave your wife a migraine? Are you talking about some ancient pain that was still embedded in there?
Your guess is as good as mine. I know that two people handled the skulls and were immediately made sick by them. One was my wife, the other was Whitley Strieber. They each had their own experiences. They each communicated to me afterwards what had happened. I heard about that from Whitley months later. Lori, of course, I had to take care of her and nurse her while she was sick. But and that was with, a 2-year-old baby boy at the time. And, it was just one of those mysterious things that have happened to me since meeting and marrying my wife.
But it wasn't just because your wife or Whitley were handling somebody's empty melon. You were,
No, well, as you know, people handle bones of other people all the time, all around the world with no ill effects. And these skulls are 950 years old, and they were shellacked. And, obviously the Star Child skull is very bizarre because the cross-section of the bone is more like the interior architecture that you see inside the skull of a bird than that you see inside of a higher-order primate mammal. The other skull was perfectly normal in every way, except that the female had some very masculine features within that skull. It was a real trick to be certain, with over 85%, certainty that she was indeed a female. And the Star Child, it was, very difficult, on a skull like that to sex it, but the DNA ended up, the initial DNA results showed that there was an X and a Y chromosome at the melogenin locus.
Well, let's hold on that thought, and I thank you for all those details. I know that if you had an encounter with Whitley Strieber, I might be able to guess that you have also met firsthand Leonard Stringfield, and I want to get to that because we're going to talk about the legends of ufology, those that are gone, and we'll talk about the work that they've done with Bill McDonald coming up next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art, this is Ian. Eeny, weeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak. We have Bill McDonald as our guest tonight in for Art Bell, and we think Art will be back on next week. I think I'll be back on Coast to Coast Live, and I look forward to the opportunity to continue what we've been doing there. But our guest, Bill, was originally scheduled to be on with us a couple of weeks ago, and he got bumped because something else came up. And he was so nice to accommodate us, and so it's a pleasure to continue our conversation here on Coast to Coast AM. And when we come back, we'll talk about the legends of ufology. Who is Leonard Stringfield? For those who are too young to have known him firsthand on this show, and the others who have made an impression, who have changed UFO research, next on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. Well, obviously, drawing on your experience as an educator, you are helping to keep the memories alive of so many people who have contributed to the modern study of UFOs, and especially for those people who have been following the subject on Coast to Coast. Many of these names are very near and dear to them, including Leonard Stringfield. Did you know him well in life?
It's an amazing story. He was Kevin Randall's major confidant during the last years of his life. And I'd had the privilege of meeting Kevin Randall in '93, and Kevin helped get me involved with the movie Roswell, which was produced by Paul Davids and Jeremy Kagan and directed by Jeremy Kagan. And I had been pestering Kevin Randall for a long time to meet Leonard. And then I found out from Don Ecker, UFO Magazine, that Len was dying of cancer. And I begged Kevin Randall to give me his phone number, and Kevin did. And unbeknownst to me, Kevin's mother was dying of lung cancer in Las Vegas, and Len Stringfield was dying of lung cancer in Cincinnati, Ohio. And my initial contact put me in touch with a young lady by the name of Chris Coffey, who was one of two personal assistants that Len had in his final days, who assisted his wife, Dell Stringfield, and I believe there was also a son. And Chris Coffey facilitated the communications between me and Leonard. At the same time, Len's cancer had gone into its end stage, and he was in a lot of pain, and he was having a horrible time breathing. And he took my phone call during that last week of his life, and it was the first of 8 phone calls where we were on with each other for hours. And, it aggravated his family, and it, had poor Dell, pulling her hair out. But Len couldn't get in touch with Kevin. He didn't know where Kevin was or why Kevin wasn't answering the phone. And he couldn't get in touch with Don Schmidt, who was Kevin's partner at the time. This was before the dissolution of their professional association. And he was going bananas because he knew that, his time was coming up, and he couldn't get a hold of anybody. He couldn't even get a hold of Walt Andrus, who was the original founder of MUFON, and he didn't know why. So he confided a bunch of stuff in me. He answered very critical questions to me regarding the Roswell case. He gave me the foundational data on the physiology and the basic anatomy of the flight crew, which I used to test the honesty of a number of the Roswell witnesses. And he begged me to convey messages to people, and of course I would. And the thing that he was so afraid of at the time was that he'd be forgotten. And I swore to him, and I mean this, and I still mean this, even though it's been 12 years now since he died. I told him, as long as I'm alive and as long as I'm doing my work, nobody will ever forget you, Len.
Well, I'm impressed that already. It seems like you can remember the name of every person you've ever met. I mean, you have an amazing recall for names and details. Let me ask you about some of those phone conversations that you had with him, though. You said you were on the phone for hours, even to the point where it was making his wife worried about him and the amount of energy he was spending. What was it that he felt like he needed to tell you? What was it that you needed him to say to you?
He had personal messages for Kevin, for Don, for Walt, and several other people. He had, the final message that he wanted to send to the other UFO researchers in regards to issues of honesty and personal honor. And he had a fear that he was going to be forgotten, and that all of his work would, go by the wayside, the way at the time Jim and Carl Lorenzen's work had fallen into disuse in an old garage somewhere.
Well, let's get down to that then. For people that don't know Leonard Stringfield and should, let's go over some of those things.
Let me tell you who Leonard Stringfield is.
Well, that would be my question, yes.
Leonard Stringfield was a member of the United States Army's intelligence cadre, serving in the Pacific Theater during World War II. He was a soldier, he was a hero, and most other people in ufology do not know this. He was a military man, and he was in the Japanese theater. And he was in an airplane flying to Iwo Jima 3 days after that horrid, brutal fighting with the flamethrowers and the knives and the bayonets ended, with the death of almost every Japanese soldier on that island and just hideous losses on the Allied side. I don't know how many people remember the Battle of Iwo Jima, but it is one of, if not the bloodiest battles of the Second World War, on a tiny volcanic island, impregnated with bunkers that had been dug in over several years by the Japanese, almost impervious to bombs. The only way to fight their way into that island was with bullets and flamethrowers, which meant that, significant numbers of our guys were going to get cut down. And the men that fought at Iwo Jima have been memorialized in Washington, D.C. You probably remember the big memorial that was designed and built by Felix, what's his last name? He's dead now. I met him when he was 93. He lived in Monarch Bay. Felix something or other.
A name you can't remember, I'm surprised.
Felix de Weldon is the designer of the Iwo Jima memorial. But Len was an intelligence agent being sent in to try to piece together intelligence from whatever they could recover from the Japanese bunkers. And he was flying in at night. It was very dangerous skies. There were still Zeeks everywhere and Kates. And the C-47 Skytrain, which is the military version of the old Douglas DC-3 Goonie bird that, just about everybody knows as probably the most recognizable airplane in history, was suddenly buzzed by three silvery, greenish, globular, self-illuminated objects that buzzed it back and forth on numerous occasions, cutting across its flight path and coming up from behind it, causing the ignition to stall and be interfered with in a manner consistent with the way Foo Fighters were being described in the European theater at the same time. Leonard and a number of other individuals in the plane were panicked. The pilots were very much panicked. They thought they were going to have to ditch the plane. And then these 3 UFOs went away. And this is why Len became obsessed with researching UFO phenomena for the rest of his life. Because his first encounter with UFOs in the skies over one of the bloodiest battlefields in the history of the United States, it scared him, it scared him witless. And after the Second World War, Len heard about the Kenneth Arnold case. And eventually he caught wind of the Roswell case after the 5th of July of 1947, when the vehicle was actually recovered. And he started piecing together testimonies. And eventually he interviewed 3 physicians. One was a pathologist, one was a hematologist, and one was a flight surgeon from the United States Army who had been in Roswell and who had made an initial preliminary examination of a cadaver of one of the flight crew members of the Roswell spacecraft. And the physiology of this being, Leonard carefully recorded, and Len also swore an oath that he would never reveal the identities of these 3 physicians. When he was dying, a number of our esteemed colleagues, and I won't name names, wanted that information desperately. And they managed to upset Len, and they managed to antagonize Del Stringfield a whole lot in their attempt to grab that information before Len died. Len explained to me that when you make a promise to somebody as a detective, as an investigator, or as a spy, a secret agent, that you never, ever, ever divulge their identity if you've made a promise not to, because they and their families can be adversely affected to such a profound degree that it can literally make it impossible for them to carry on in the future. And Len was a man who kept his word to people, whether it was providing information to Kevin Randall or whether it was refusing to provide contact information on the 3 physicians. The man operated from a personal character of total honesty. Now, you've heard George Norrie call Stanton T. Friedman the father of modern ufology.
Yes, I think so.
Leonard Stringfield was the generation ahead of Stan Friedman. He is the grandfather of modern ufology and one of, probably not the first, but one of the first research investigators who have a trained background as either a spook or a detective or whatever, to take an honest and detailed look at the phenomena the way it should be analyzed. He knew how to interview witnesses in a non-combative and a non-confrontational manner so that they wouldn't shut down. He knew how to get people to tell their story 4 different times, 4 different ways, from 4 different perspectives, so that he could find any discrepancies in the versions and clear it up. Or, if necessary, that's a great way to catch a liar. Len was an absolute believer in UFO phenomena. He'd seen it himself with his own eyes. Len had total respect for a man over in France by the name of Jacques Vallée, and he had total respect for some of the other research that was being conducted, including people like Jim and Carl Lorenzen. He had problems with them, and he had joyful times with them, but at the end of his life, he was very grateful that they had been there, that they'd been around, that they had contributed in their way, because, as he said, no one person can ever solve this mystery. It will take the combined efforts of all of the research investigators working in harmony and not in competition with each other in order to break this mystery.
Well, what would you say would be Len Stringfield's greatest contribution to the study?
His files and the message I just conveyed to you. He had meticulous files. He issued a number of pamphlets and various books with, newsletters with, his cases and his notations. There were books with his cases published.
What were the cases that he would be best known for, where he was the primary investigator on?
A number of cases across the Midwest of the United States, and of course the Roswell case. The Roswell case, the Roswell case. Always the Roswell case.
Okay. Because, I think that, there are reasons why Stanton Friedman would be, best known in some cases. He certainly had the profile on some of the most famous of the modern cases. Of the ones which Len investigated, where he was, as you said, toward the end of his life, concerned about being forgotten about, what would have been the cases that he would want people, we all talk about Roswell, but what would be some of the other cases that
Len was worried about the body of his work, and it's enormous. He was a juggernaut for gathering and taking notes on UFO reports from all over the world. He collected.
Right. But what would be the stories? What would be the ones that he thought were the ones that people should remember the most, that might not have gotten as much publicity as Roswell?
That's a question we'd have to call up Chris Coffey and ask her about, because she was much closer to him than I was. Okay. I only knew him for 1 week.
Okay. And so we've established, obviously, that he was a legend, but you've had a chance to kind of investigate some of the others as well. Who are some of the other names of the ufologists that you've been studying?
Well, the other senior ufologist who had done some incredible work, in some cases on par with Jacques Vallée, especially in regards to abduction cases, was Dr. Carla Turner. That's Carla with a K. Carla Turner was a very highly educated lady from... She had a home in the backwoods of Arkansas where she lived with her husband, Eldon Turner. And she had a background in psychology, and she had a background in history, and she had done teaching, and she had done a wide variety of things in her life. And she published several books which are still out there. If you put in Carla Turner, K-A-R-L-A, Turner, into Google, her books will pop right up. They're still available in different places from different vendors in the UFO community and elsewhere. And she was, again, one of the most outstanding examples of an honorable person that I have ever met. I also only had the opportunity to know her for a few months. She was lecturing in Los Angeles, San Diego, and Orange County, and I had finagled it with all three MUFON groups to be her driver because I had followed some of her opinions regarding the results of her work, and I didn't agree with any of it. And I wanted the opportunity to have a private debate with her. So, I asked for and received the privilege of being her driver. And the most amazing experience happened. She and I fought like cats and dogs over the interpretations of her data, but she was the most soothing. She was the most relaxing. She was the most wonderful person I had ever spent any time with in my life, and I miss her terribly. She was older than me, and she was a married woman, and of course I never would have crossed any of those lines or boundaries. She was just too honorable to, sully in such a way.
But you were attracted to her.
Oh, my God. And I'd already met my wife, but this woman, if only I'd met her, some years ago.
You wouldn't be married.
She was just the most amazing person I'd ever met in my life of the female persuasion. I adore her.
Second to your wife.
Now, my wife is the most it's indescribable being married to Laurie.
Okay, but just go with second to your wife. She's the most.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't even try and nuance that. I would just go with, oops, I meant to say second to my wife.
Absolutely. Second to my wife.
There you go.
But I also try to be very, very honest when it comes to the subject of ufology and other people's research and things like that.